Hello fellow woodworkers, welcome to this week's edition of the Garage Workshop, and in this week's video I finish off the 3D printer unit that I started a couple of weeks ago, but wait until the end. There's a rather unfortunate incident. Roll the intro. So this is where I left the unit at the end of the last video. If you haven't seen it, I'll put a link in the description to this video. So what I wanted to do was get the piano hinges on. Now, I wasn't going mad about fixing them. I have actually marked out a line. It's a bit difficult for you to see, but I just wanted to hook them on just so they were literally there. I then took the sides and ran them through the table saw at a 40 to 45 degree angle, to sort of miter the two of them together in a sort of L shape. Now, you probably didn't see it very clearly on there, but when I first pushed that first piece of wood through, it actually moved a bit and it gave me a larger gap at the top than it did at the bottom. It's not 100% straight, and later on that becomes a little bit of a problem, but I hooked it then together. I just used wood glue for this, which again, with hindsight, I probably should have done something else, because the wood glue I don't think was ever going to be solid enough, and in the end I sort of got around it, but only just. So when I'd hooked it together, I wasn't really very happy with how it looked. It just didn't feel very strong. Anyway, I moved on to pocket hole the back and then fix it on. Okay, so I've just hooked the cabinet together. There's a couple of little pieces where I think I'm going to need to touch up the paint, and obviously, as you can see, I've got these great big pocket hole gaps now where the screws are. So I jumped onto MakerLab and I found these. These are pocket hole screw sort of covers. I found them on MakerLab, downloaded them, and they are designed to fit the size that my pocket holes are. So I'm just going to put it in, fingers crossed they fit all right, because them being inside will at least, you know, stop that horrible hole showing, and if not, I'll fill it and paint it. But let's see if these fit in. Yep, they fit absolutely perfectly. I think they're going to need a tiny little bit of wood glue to keep them in place, but yeah, I'm really happy with that. I just printed out about a dozen or so, so I've got enough to cover all these. You will have seen I did do a pocket hold this top plank. The reason that I did that was it was completely my mistake. I forgot. I thought the plank, this top sort of supporting strut, sat inside, but it doesn't. But to be honest with you, the pocket holes haven't breached either of the sides, so you're not going to know. And again, I can either choose to fill the hole up, which, to be fair, I think I can get away with doing. I might have to just chop the end off, but where it is, you're not going to notice it anyway. So I'm just going to get a tiny little bit of wood glue, and I'll plug all these holes. The next thing I did was just attach the hinge, the piano hinge, on the opposite side. Same thing. Okay, I've just unclamped these, and weirdly, in a way that I cannot explain to you, this piece of wood is smaller. You can hopefully see the gap there and the gap there. It's smaller than the other piece of wood, even though they were identically cut. You will have seen that earlier in the video. The other one is absolutely fine, but then when you look up here, there's a little bit of a gap up here as well, which isn't much. It's almost like that piece of wood has shrunk. It's about 2 mil smaller than the other one. So that just means that when I come to fix this, I'm going to have to be aware, because it's absolutely fine at the bottom. It's perfectly in line at the bottom. So when I come to fit this, I'm going to put that at the sort of top of the unit, because I think it will be hidden a little bit. But that's just so odd. But now that I've got them here, it's really untidy on the inside. It's actually really untidy on the outside too. There's a really big gap, particularly this one. The other one's not so bad. That one's got a really big gap at the top, not too bad a gap at the bottom. But if I look at the other side, the gap is a lot better. It doesn't look it, but it's actually a lot better up and down. So there's two things I can do to that. I can either get a strip of metal and put it on the end and make it look like a decorative feature, or I could get some sort of corner bit made out of wood to make it look a bit better, or I could just fill it with filler. I did think about painting over it, and I could paint over it and probably fill that gap with paint, but I'm not sure how that would look. But the other thing is, I'm not overly keen about the inside here. There's quite a big gap on this first one that I glued. So what I'm actually going to do is use the offcut of the cut, which fits in there perfectly. And I've got two of them. I'm going to put those two in. Now, slightly out at the top, but I think when that's painted, I don't think you'll really see it. And this will be on the inside of the unit anyway. So the next thing to do is put those, in fact, I'm going to put that the other way up so it's even less noticeable. So what I'm going to do is glue them, but I'm just going to put in a couple of small brads on there just to keep them in place. So I'm going to put them in. I am going to run over it with some paint, but again, I'll do that when it's fixed in. But apart from that, they're not looking too bad. The other big concern is the weight. They weigh an absolute ton, which was my concern, which is why I've gone for two full-length piano hinges, and I've literally put in a screw on the piano hinge every other screw. But I'm now thinking, because of the weight, I might actually screw in every single hole, because they're not massive screws, and what I don't want is the weight to not be carried equally. In terms of the inside, these clips worked really, really well, the pocket hole clips, but the other issue I've got is, as you can see here, this is connected, but it's connected to this base unit. There's nothing connecting this side to this side up here. I didn't put in a pocket hole at the top, which was an error, so I'm stuck a little bit there. But what I think I'm going to do, I've got some metal brackets, and I think I might just pop in a couple of those metal brackets just there, because again, you're not going to see them. Here I'm going to have another piano hinge for that, so pretty close to finishing, and get that done now. That's the next stage. Get all of that done, get it glued up, and then I'm going to go ahead and fix the doors. So I attached these pieces just using wood glue at first, but I could tell when I stuck them on that wasn't going to be effective at all. So I got my airstrike nailer out and just popped in some brads just to sort of keep them in place more than anything else. And when I came to paint it, which was the next thing I did, yet more painting, when I came to paint it, I was able to actually just fill in the holes with some filler, and the paint sort of filled the gaps between the edge of that strip and the actual edge of the unit. There was a couple of little gaps, tiny, only about 1 mil, but the paint obviously filled it in, which was fantastic, although I'm sick of painting. I then hooked on this is the door, the other side that you can see, it's laying side by side. I just drilled and screwed in the piano hinge. Not sure if those screws were big enough, and actually at the end you'll see why I say that. Stood the unit up. This was the first time I'd stood it up with the doors, and as you can see at the top, you can see there's a difference there. The sort of right hand door looks like it's leaning back a bit, but overall I was pleased with how it fit. But it did give me a couple of extra thoughts about some possible strips. Then I just filled the gap with some wood filler. where the joint hadn't stuck properly. One side was definitely a lot better than the other, but it was also here that I noticed that the back unit had popped out, so I had to undo the pocket holes, pressure it to go flat to the bottom and redo them again. I wasn't happy with the top either, so I just made this sort of extra brace really across the top, loads of pocket holes in it as you can see, but putting it in solved all the issues and the unit looked a lot better, and it was obviously a lot stronger, and I just painted it from the inside. I then moved on to the shelf that was going into it. This was a sort of hangover really from having the piece of wood cut incorrectly at B&Q. The shelf, which should have been perfect, wasn't, so I did have to make some adjustments to it. Nothing major, but everything in the cut list I gave him was absolutely perfect, but just one of those things. When I cut the strip off, I offered it up and it was a perfect fit, which I was very pleased about. But obviously now that I had those angled supports that were on the inside of the doors that you just saw me cut, obviously I had to make a change to the shelf because the doors then wouldn't close properly. And then I just moved on the sort of side supports of the shelf. I'd used one of the Bamboo Labs PLU boxes to get the right height, and then I just ran this through and got them to exactly the right height, offered them up with the shelf on the top, and then just checked that the box fit in, which it fitted in absolutely perfectly. And obviously you can see from the depth there, I'm going to fit quite a lot in. I just then marked off, obviously I've got to mitre this piece of wood to match the shelf. When I'd done that mitre, I put it on the mitre saw, and here you'll see as I ran it through, I'd forgotten to move the guide across, so the saw actually made a little cut in the guide. It's not very big, it's not gone all the way through. You know, you're going to forget some things, aren't you? Anyway, when that was done, I mitered the ends of both of those sort of shelf supports, and I was really pleased actually. The quality of the mitre that I got on it was really nice. You'll see in a minute, it was very, very clean. The next thing to do was to offer up the actual printer. Now I have got a 3D printed stand for this AMS that you can see on the top is usually on the side. I printed this stand, and you have to have these white supports. You can just sort of see the band there, and that increases the depth or the length of the printer. So I offered it up, made sure it was all fitting and the doors would shut, and I also made a little mark at the back where I wanted to drill a hole for the power lead to come through. I picked up this little sort of plumbing plug which was exactly the right size, but when I was happy that it was okay, I then got my hole saw set out to cut the hole. So cutting this hole, I picked this tip up from YouTube, someone on YouTube somewhere along the line. So I drilled until the end of the drill had just sort of pierced the back. Apparently this stops you getting cut out. And then I went round the back and obviously drilled back in from the front. And the hole is absolutely clean as a whistle. I put in the little plastic holder thing that I had. As you can see, it's a little bit loose, but that wasn't a problem. I just put a couple of bits of white duct tape around it and it was fine. Yet again, more paint needed, a couple of coats. This time I just went on with the primer, the Leyland primer first, did a couple of coats of that, and then I put on the top coat. So exactly the same process that the unit had outside when I'd painted it, painted the main parts of the unit. Took a long time this. And I wanted to make sure I got it well. Now, I didn't do anything with these pocket holes. I didn't put those pocket hole things in there because you're never going to see it. And this single pocket hole you can see at the front, I just used that to sort of attach it to the front because it wasn't sitting perfectly. I then moved on to creating the stand for the unit, and I have to say this is the best thing that I've ever done. This stand is brilliant. It's exactly how I want it to be. It's very, very well made, and it includes a lot of techniques that I haven't used before, particularly one on this channel which you'll see in a minute. So I was super pleased with it, and I cut the 4 pieces, 2 that are one length and 2 that are another length. So when I'd done that, I put them all through the table to make sure they were the same width. Obviously there's sort of 2 pairs of parallel lengths one slightly longer than the other because the unit's not a square on the bottom, but they're all exactly the same width. So I'd set up a sacrificial fence there as well, as you can see, and I got them all exactly the right size, all 4 pieces. And when those 4 pieces were cut and they were the right size, I then moved on to just roughing out a really basic design. I mean, you don't get any more basic than this. The same width all the way across, and then I just used the sort of width of my square to be the sort of focal point of the legs. I've gone for sort of very basic, simple, triangular cut-off feet, which you'll see in a minute. Really easy shape, but just good marking, good measuring, and then it was just a case of joining up the lines with each other, which is again really straightforward stuff. When I'd done that, I then decided to stick them together, and I actually felt like a proper YouTuber, because I know I've seen Jason do this on Bourbon Moth loads of times and loads of other people, but I used some double-sided tape to stick these 2 together, and it worked a treat. In fact, it was really difficult to separate the pieces of wood. That is really strong, that double-sided sticky tape. It's just 3M one. I got it from Aldi or Lidl, somewhere along the line. But I just connected the 2 together, got them 100% where they should be, because the plan was to cut these together on the miter saw, which is what I ended up doing, which you'll see in a minute. And I was just super careful with how I stuck these together. So as I ran them through the saw, as you can see, I'm being so careful. I went through both pieces of wood, but I really sort of snuck up to the cuts, and I didn't go too close at all, because I wanted to make sure I didn't sort of overcut, and I could take the rest off with I used a Japanese pull saw to tidy them up, but I was so careful with how I made these cuts. I'd rather undercut than overcut, and then it was just a case of using my multi-tool to cut the sort of rest of the bits of remaining wood out. It took a while, I'm not going to lie, it wasn't as simple a process as I thought it was going to be, but it did give me a really nice quality cut. There was one tiny little burn mark, I'm not sure why, but I literally just hand sanded that out, and it only took a couple of minutes. It was only a small one. So you can see the difference in the length of wood there, yet more painting, but then I went on to use a technique I've not used on the channel before, which was a biscuit jointer, which I've had for a long time. So it was just a case of marking up the middles of where I wanted the biscuits to sit, and then getting the biscuit joiner and hooking them on. It was really straightforward. First time I'd done it on an angle as well, but I was super pleased with how it came out. I did do a dry fit using the biscuits. You can see them there. These are actually Parkside biscuits, and they're brilliant. They're better than the Erbauer biscuits that I bought when I bought the biscuit jointer. But when I was happy and satisfied that they were okay, I then went and glued them and hooked them together. And I used this strap thing you'll see in a minute, which I bought from Parkside years ago, and I've never used it. This is the first time I've used it, and it was absolutely brilliant. So it helped keep everything straight. It helped keep the pressure up, and I left it for a good couple of days though to dry. When I knew it was dry, I unhooked it, checked all the angles, and it was absolutely perfect, spot on. I then went back to the side units. I was not happy with the join in the door, so I went to B&Q and bought a sort of strip wood section. It cost me £9.47, that piece of wood, which is an incredible amount of money, but I wasn't happy, so I did some really accurate measurements, took it over to the bandsaw and cut it to the right length. I was really careful cutting this wood as well, because it was so thin, and obviously being like an L shape, I was a bit worried about it splitting, which luckily it didn't. Did just give me a little edge though, a little cutout edge, so I knocked that off with my hand sand. It was only a little bit, and when that was done, again another case of more painting. And I did this outside. We actually had some nice weather in the UK, and I put some lacquer on, which you'll see in a minute here, which was a mistake because the wind blew some of the lacquer, and now my glass table is covered in white paint, but it will come off. The next thing I wanted to do was address that issue with the door. The left-hand side door, the right-hand side as you're looking at it, was just a tiny bit too big. I don't know how or why, but it wasn't shutting. It was sort of over folding the middle, and it wasn't giving me a very good shut line. I've been watching a lot of Matt of Armstrong there, so I know what a shut line is. So I just took a little tiny little strip off, and it made all the difference. It sort of lined it back up, but it did make me think I need another strip. Then I just hooked on the frame at the bottom, really straightforward, just the pocket holes that you saw me cut earlier. A bit awkward this, I actually had to use the clamp to prop it up, but no problem just fixing it. And obviously when it's on, it made the unit a little bit taller as well. Next thing, I went outside and I absolutely sanded the living daylights out of it. I wasn't very happy with the paint finish. Even though I'd been hand sanding it back, I just wasn't very happy with it. So I put on the DeWalt and gave it a proper sand all over. Okay, so it's finished. I have to say I'm a lot happier. I think it looks a million times better. In between all of the individual coats, I did knock it back with a little hand sander with some 240 grit paper on it, but now looking at it, obviously it needed a proper sanding back. Now sanding it also, I have 150 grit on that. It's revealed a couple of things. This is interesting, I didn't notice those before. 2 pocket holes. There's another one here at the back, although I don't know why that's there because there's no pocket hole on the inside. And the same here, 2 pocket holes. The paint on this side, for some reason, is a lot messier than it is everywhere else, but it's a lot better than it was. But I am now going to have to give it one more coat of paint. So I'm going to paint the entire outside, give it a proper amount of time to dry, and then I'll just put on a 240 pad on my sander, and I'll just knock it off again. You know, hand sanding it, which I was doing between every layer, I thought was taking it back enough because I was giving it some welly, but obviously it didn't take it back enough because now I've got the DeWalt on it. It's flattened the paint really nicely, but also you can see places like this where the paint has gone a bit too close. So next stage, I'm going to blow it all off just to get all the dust off, and then I'm going to give it another full coat. So I had a little piece of strip wood lying around which I thought would be great for the front. So again, more painting, just put a few coats of paint on it. This is sort of going to go on the front to cover the split. You'll see what I mean in a minute, but I was actually pleased with how it turned out. I wasn't really sure whether or not it was going to work, but it really did. So when I'd done the painting, as you can see, I'm sort of just doing the edge here. One of the things I decided to do at this point was to cover the entire 3D printed unit in this tin of lacquer that I've got. It's sort of like a white paint, but it's also got a lacquer in it. I bought it from Parkside a few years ago, and I've used it on a few projects, and it just makes everything really, really sort of glossy looking. And I just thought that would be a really good way of A, getting a good finish, and B, also meaning I wasn't going to spend the next 10 years painting and repainting because I wasn't very happy with the finish on the outside of the unit, which I'm very, very pleased I didn't do, but that's coming up. So this was me attaching the third piano hinge. This was actually quite difficult to do because I couldn't just put it sort of flat with the bottom because obviously the bend is in the top. I had to space it out, but luckily I'd kept my my square on the same measurement it was for the side unit, so it just gave me the mark which matches the one I use when I attach the piano hinges on either side. So as you can see, you should be able to see that hinge is not sort of flush with the bottom of that piece of wood. It's raised up just the sort of width of the hinge at the top, which obviously was very deliberate. The other thing is I didn't use this first one in particular. I didn't use my drill, my electric screwdriver to do this. I did this by hand, and that was very very deliberate. It wasn't just a sort of mistake. But what I did notice from doing this was the screws that I'd used, I wasn't very happy with how deep they were going in. I didn't want to take the risk of splitting the MDF. But as you'll see later, that decision to use the smaller screws really wasn't the best one. But when the lid was attached, as you'll see in a minute, it was a really good moment because you could actually see the unit being finished, and although it looks like the lid's just laying on the top there, it isn't. I've actually put in a little spacer in between the two, just a piece of cardboard really. It's just about 1 mil or so thick, and that spacer is just there to make sure that I've got the same gap at the top of the hinge that I've got at the bottom of the other one, if you see what I mean. If I'd have just buttered them up, there wouldn't have been enough room for the hinge. I just put a tiny little spacer of cardboard, which gave me enough room that I was able then to sort of elevate the lid. I did use the electric screwdriver on this one because A, I was running out of time, and B, I really wanted to make sure that I drove those screws in as deep as I could. The other thing I did here, which I did top and bottom, is I put a screw in every hole with what I think every other hole, but on this one I didn't take that risk. So there is literally a screw in every single one of the holes on that piano hinge. So with that done, the lid opened and closed nicely, very pleased with that. And then I went back outside and applied that coat of lacquer that I just mentioned to you. And not only did I use the lacquer, you probably can't see it very clearly, but I used that Parkside paint sprayer thing that they had, which is like a trigger and it turns your spray can into a gun. First time I'd used it properly, and it was really good. Watching this footage back though, I did see how much my paint flew around absolutely everywhere, which isn't ideal, but it did give me a good coat. Coming into the last stages now, it was time to attach that strip, and all I did, I literally just used a gun for this because I knew I was gonna fill the gaps in and give it another little coat of paint anyway. I just literally used my airstrike nailer. I was very careful because it's very, very easy for you to split this wood, and I actually did split it, but it's at the bottom on the front there, and to be fair, you can't really see it, to be honest, but I was very careful. I did it. I used really small brads on this as well. I think they were 18 mil, and obviously they were going into the MDF, which did make it slightly easier, but I was very careful with how I did it. And then, of course, the last stage was just putting the strip on. I had put a little sort of connector at the top off camera. I didn't actually realise I hadn't recorded that, but I just literally attached the strip, and afterwards, I think off camera, I just went and filled those holes in that you can see me making there. So, fellow woodworkers, this is the point where I was going to record my outro to my long standing project on the 3D printer, and I've just wheeled it out of the garage to give it a tiny little paint touch up just on a couple of things, and sadly this is what happened. It's very windy in the UK today. The wind caught hold of the cabinet when I was opening the doors, blew it backwards, and it smashed on the drive. Now, the damage is pretty substantial. Obviously the hinges have been ripped out, but as you can see, this part of the this door is completely knackered. It's actually split the wood that was on it in two. This door's not broken as badly, but it's come off, so that one could be replaced. But more worryingly is the top of the unit. As you can see, the wood on that side is totally destroyed. The top's actually okay, but that bit you're going to see the damage on that. There's no way I can tidy that up. The only thing I could potentially do is switch it around and put that at the front, but then I've got all the holes on it. Real disaster, and a real shame, because before I started touching the paint up, it actually looked really good. And of course I've got a whole tin of paint now on my driveway, acrylic I think it is as well, and I've got no idea how you even start tidying that up. So yeah, not really the way that I wanted to end this video, but I will have a look at repairing it. I'm not going to do anything for a moment, to be honest, because I've literally lived this cabinet now for, well, I started it in December and it's now the beginning of March, so I just need a bit of a break from it. But yeah, disappointing. So thank you very much for watching the video. If you're new to the channel, please can I ask you to subscribe, like and comment. If you're a regular viewer, thank you for watching. Also, don't forget to like and comment. Somewhere in the future I'll give you an update on this project, but for now I'm going to put that down as a failure. Take care, fellow woodworkers. So, fellow woodworkers, as you can see, I didn't give up and the cabinet is now in full working order. I'll see you on next week's edition of the Garage Workshop. Take care, fellow woodworkers.